Surrogate of love. Tell me, how do you feel about alcohol? I assume your answer will be something like, I have an even attitude towards alcohol. In reasonable quantities, I drink occasionally in company. And drugs, of course, are evil. And drugs, of course, are evil. And what's your attitude towards food? Food is a vital necessity, and yes, I love to eat deliciously. Who doesn't? But, of course, within reasonable limits. What do you think unites all of the above? The fact that all of this, alcohol, drugs, food, brings physical and psycho-emotional pleasure. They satisfy a person for a short time. You drank and relaxed, took a drug and got disconnected from reality, had a delicious meal and enjoyed it, and it seems that life became easier. In fact, such processes are an attempt to get quick pleasure, but sometimes with the aim of filling an emotional void, to forget. Deficit of love continuing from childhood. Do you remember this concept? And the unsatisfied current need to love and be loved. The love of others gives us certain sensations: calmness, security, joy, importance, value. Love fills us, inspires, gives strength. When there isn't any love, one, on the contrary, feels empty, lonely, not wanted, sad, anxious, confused. It's precisely this spiritual emotional hunger that prompts a person to seek quick pleasures. Alcohol, drugs, food, promiscuous sexual relationships. As it happens, the above-mentioned compulsions are a surrogate for love. These are attempts to satisfy oneself for a short time. Rather than working on a relationship, on their inner state, a person finds an outlet in quick pleasures. But this is not a way out. This is an abyss when you're left alone with yourself and with your unfulfilled needs. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't drink or eat. No. But it shouldn't replace fundamentally important things. For example, fulfilling the need to love and be loved. Aggression in relationships. I will never forgive him. This is unforgivable. What exactly? He hit me. The topic of domestic violence is anomalous. It's not supposed to happen, but it's all around. Parents beat children. Husbands beat wives. The physically strong beat the weak. This is not normal. It shouldn't be like this, but it is so. Why? Aggression is a way to give vent to one's pain. It's an attempt to compensate for one's suffering through the suffering of another person. At the same time, it should be noted that there is passive aggression and active aggression. In the first case, it's psychological pressure and bullying. In the second case, it's physical harm, beating and violence. We'll talk about violence later. Now we'll speak about domestic physical abuse. It hurts when someone you love and who you have children with hits you. If a criminal on the street hit you, it wouldn't be so much offensive as scary. But the wound is particularly deep if your husband, father or brother hits you. Those we love hurt us the most. Those we don't expect meanness from, but on the contrary, we believe that he or she is my protection and support. Earlier, we spoke that alcohol, drugs, overeating, passive and active aggression are attempts to compensate for one's deficit, to numb one's emotional suffering, and get quick pleasure. Does this mean that when you understand the motive of the offender's behavior, this person should be forgiven? Yes, they ought to be forgiven, but in a certain manner. To forgive is to break the mental connection that torments, and to regain the lost peace. The person who hurt you can be understood and pitied, but importantly, pitied emotionally, not actively, and just enough for your psychological and physical safety not to be violated. In your thoughts, you can understand an aggressive person. Understand that they're sick, that they're driven by their inner problems, that aggression is the outlet for their pain. But at the same time, you have to remain safe and keep away from them. It's just like with a dog that bit its owner. You can forgive and pity it, but you don't want to offer it this opportunity again. Pity is always a destructive feeling. It's always followed by an impulse to save the other. Oh, he is so poor, unhappy, unloved. That's why he's so angry. Now I'll help him. I'll endure it all. I'll make up for what he's been lacking, and he'll change. He'll love me and appreciate me. This won't happen. This trap has been the undoing of many kind-hearted women. He won't understand anything, won't change, won't stop beating her up. He will continue not to appreciate, hurt, and turn her life into hell. People say that if a man raised his hand against a woman once, he will always do it, while a dog that bites its owner has to be put down, one's partner has to be got rid of. You don't believe this? Read some forums on the topic, and you can find out what women who stayed in relationships with abusers say. You don't need to save, or who needs to be saved. In a relationship with an aggressor, there are two extremes. The first is, I will never forgive him. The second is, I will save him and he will change. Such conclusions are usually made by women who are in abusive relationships or who have a savior complex. And do you know what this means? That such women need to be saved themselves. They're in a trauma. Subconsciously, they believe that they're not worth anyone's love, that love needs to be earned, that they need to endure something, and that someday someone will appreciate it. Such a position is a dead end. It's impossible to help another if you need help yourself, especially as far as psychology is concerned. In order to help another, you need knowledge and resources. If you yourself lack emotional strength, what is there to share with another? Therefore, to get out of the impasse, to heal the soul, it's necessary to find the middle course. To forgive and to save, but only yourself. You need to save not the aggressor, but only yourself. Love and relationships. Unfortunately, the world is full of stories where the dearest ones, who are supposed to be one's support and backbone, are pretty much strangers in reality, and the people are indifferent to each other. Here's a story. My husband kicked me out of the house with a small child. He kept everything we acquired together. He married a young woman. I will never forgive him. Or this one. My father left us when I was very young. For many years, he didn't remember me, his daughter. I can't forgive him. Because of this, my relationships with men don't work out. Notice that resentment always appears within the framework of some relationships, with family, parents, and friends. No one gets hurt by a passerby, a stranger, but always by someone close. Why is that? The thing is, relationships are a way to exchange love. In a relationship, we subconsciously count on our partner's love. And love is not only hugs and kisses, it's also support, attention, patience, communication, care, honesty, decency. Relationships differ from non-relationships because with the latter it is no one owes anything to anyone. In a relationship, meanwhile, people have rights and obligations to each other. For example, friendship is about honesty, openness, and responsiveness. Parents are about upbringing, care, and support. Family is about fidelity, protection, sincerity, tenderness. Even in business relationships, there ought to be decency. In any relationship, people owe something to each other. But the fulfillment of these duties should be carried out not forcefully, but by the call of the heart. This is the essence. I believe in you because I love you. I want to spend time with you because I love you. I want to be honest with you because I love you. Rights and obligations in relationships should be realized not forcefully, but by the call of the heart. There are these words in the Bible: "Owe no one anything except to love each other." Romans chapter 13, verse 8. And love means respect, honesty, care, patience, support, forgiveness. The time has come to admit to yourself, we get offended by each other for lack of love, for not getting what we need in relationships, and for something done to us that hurts. The stronger the resentment, the more little offenses there are, the worse the relationship. Think about it. Action and inaction. Let's look at this dialogue. How do you get on with your mother? I don't. Why? We don't communicate. She doesn't call. Since I moved to another city, we have become strangers. Our relationship has always been cold. She loves my younger sister more than me. Does it bother you? Yes, it hurts me, but I try not to think about it. Sometimes we get offended by a person's inaction. Probably we expect something from them, but nothing happens. The loved one didn't call, didn't congratulate, didn't offer help, didn't support, didn't give a gift. There may be all sorts of unfulfilled expectations. Now, this is one kind of pain, but it also may so happen that we get offended by the actions of another person, when they insult, hit, cheat, steal, deceive, do something mean, do something unworthy. This is something completely different. In the first case, it may be that the person did not intend to cause you pain, and it may be that they too are expecting something from you, and are also silently bearing a grudge. Or perhaps they're ashamed, scared, nervous, or don't have the emotional resources to reach out to you. Anything may hide behind another person's inaction. I think in cases where we expect something from each other, it's likely that there should be something there. There may be something as we're in some kind of relationship, a personal one or with friends or family. We don't expect attention from neighbors on the third floor now, do we? Or from people we barely know. We expect attention from people close to us. But why it might not be there is another question. What can't you forgive them for? We were visiting friends. Then we drove home. When we were sitting in the car, we argued. I was saying something. Suddenly he grabbed me by the hair and hit my head against the dashboard. Oh my, I didn't see that coming. How's he behaving now? Did he say he was sorry? Yes, he did. He says he deeply regrets it. He comes to my work with flowers, calls me, meets me after work. I don't know what to do. There are stories when people get offended by insulting actions. Here, it's important to consider the context. In one case, a person caused pain unexpectedly for themselves, flared up in anger, said stupid things, and promptly tries to make amends. In another case, a person deliberately commits aggressive, regular actions, without being sorry for that. This is something completely different. All this ought to be reacted to differently. In the first case, you can make an attempt to make the relationship warmer. For example, call your parents, talk to a friend, or have a talk with a person to understand each other. As for the second case, if the damage is done consciously and regularly, you ought to forgive as well, but at the same time, draw conclusions and then run for it. To forgive an aggressor doesn't mean to wash away the sin from their soul. Not at all. First and foremost, it's to restore your mental balance not to restore relationship with them. Let's say a person borrowed money, knowing in advance that they don't intend to return it, thereby causing pain. If you forgive them, it doesn't mean that they will become free from their misdeeds before God. No, it means that you will be free from this person and their sins will remain with them. Sooner or later, they will answer for them. All offenses are very different, and forgiveness should be different. Does it make sense to you? To forgive an aggressor doesn't mean to wash away sins from their soul. It means to regain the peace you've lost and break the mental connection. But the responsibility for their wrongdoing will stay with them. About you. It's they who are bad, insensitive, mean, and evil, and I'm a sheer angel who has been wronged. Perhaps you're a good person and indeed suffered unfairly. But everything is ambiguous in life. There are always some details which are not easily noticeable at first glance. Everything that happens to us reveals the true state of the soul. Any situation is a stimulus that presses to the sore spot and suggests what to pay attention to, what else can be worked on for you to get closer to perfection. There is a woman I know. She is simple, she doesn't like confrontations, she'll never begrudge you a meal, and will always offer a helping hand. As she says, she never did anything bad in life and lived a good life. But about a conflict with her daughter, she says, "I will never forgive the insult. I'm a very proud woman." And she emphasized the word proud with her voice. You can be a good person to others, but if you dig deeper, it turns out that your soul is full of devilish pride. I want to point out here that to people we may seem very different, while God always sees us from the inside, the way we are, and He would like for a person to become better throughout their lifetime. Let's not forget that when people die, they don't take anything with them. Their hands are empty. All their wealth and material possessions remain here on earth. Only the state of their soul is with them. This state is acquired throughout life, or else it is supposed to be acquired. It's precisely for this that we're in relationships, among other things, to polish each other, like pebbles on a beach. We need to get on with each other, forgive, understand, show care, be able to give and receive. This is difficult. This is about working on your inner self. No matter how much we'd like to think that we're good, when it comes to the soul of each of us, there is something negative too. You can sympathize with some hungry person, but at the same time be in a state of pride, along the lines of, "I will never forgive." You will forgive. Somehow life won't offer another choice but this. The way a person reacts to an external irritant shows in what state their soul really is. Am I magnanimous only on the outside, or on the inside as well? Why is it so hard? Despite the fact that pain cannot be seen, put on scales and weighed, every person can assess the pain in their heart. Unpleasant but bearable. It hurts me a lot. Unbearably painful. I don't know how to live with this. Everyone's pain is different, and everyone reacts differently to the same thing. What does this depend on? On many factors. For example, on the state of the soul, on psychological health, on inborn temperament. There are people who are naturally disposed to forgive lightly. They got offended and forgot, while others keep coming back to their pains and their thoughts and suffer. For example, it's not uncommon for a woman to be unable to psychologically recover for 2-3 years after a divorce, and some withdraw into themselves for a whole 5 years. 5 years of emotional suffering, with varying success. Sometimes it abates, then it comes back again, sometimes with a vengeance. Others are at the receiving end of an adultery. A couple gets divorced and either goes their own way, recovering quite quickly. The depth of suffering depends not only on the severity of what happened, but also on every individual, on the state of their inner world. We are very different. Different externally, internally. We have different destinies and goals, and the ability to cope with difficulties is also different. For some, forgiveness comes easily from birth, and for others, the same thing takes a lot of effort. When something bad happens, we always have a choice of how to behave, how to react to what happened, how long to stay in the conflict. To be honest, I believe that despite the fact that you're reading this book, a book about forgiveness, some of you are probably not ready to forgive. There may be an understanding that forgiveness is necessary, but there may be no desire to actually do it. And some are ready and want to, but don't understand how. How to force your heart to react differently. How to redirect the flow of your thoughts. Don't stop. Try to understand. There is a good chance that you will succeed. Why is it so hard to endure resentment? In some cases, it's not because the resentment is too deep, but because you're spiritually weak. It's like in sports. Different people handle the same weight differently. And your personal path of forgiveness can tell you a lot about yourself and lead to many things. As people say, whatever happens is for the best. Only this best becomes clear and noticeable over time. A person is capable of deriving benefit from everything, as long as there is a desire to do so. Where to start the path of forgiveness? At this point, you have already analyzed the behavior of the person who wronged you, how aware they are of their misconduct. You looked into your heart and tried to assess the severity of your pain. A lot of work has been done so far. What comes next on our path is no less interesting and important. Someone has dealt you your wound, and you're in some kind of relationship with them. I don't know what kind. Maybe a business or personal one, perhaps your friends or family. You know better. You've already been together on the path of life with them. Maybe it's 10 years of friendship, or 5 years of marriage, or perhaps it's a strained relationship with an emotionally cold mother who ruined your childhood. The person you are hurt by is of some value to you. Yes, perhaps now, because of the pain, the feeling of value has dampened, but nevertheless, it was definitely there before. Now, being at some stage of your relationship, you need to make a decision. Will you keep this person in your life or not? Are they important to you? Do you need this person's love or not? When I was 15 years old, I envied children who had a father, a loving one. Some had one, and I didn't. I thought about this a lot, and was restless. Then, over time, I made a firm decision that I wanted to have a loving father. I wanted to have a warm relationship with him, despite everything. Despite the pain there was between him and Mum. Despite the fact that he hadn't taken care of us for several years. During that period, I was comforted by the thought that he was alive, and therefore my dream would become a reality. I wanted to have a loving dad. This desire possessed me so much. I saw the desired image in my head, and I didn't care at all what there had happened in the past. I didn't want to remember what was in the past. I didn't want to relive the pain of memories, ask painful questions over and over again. I needed something new. When we met, I gingerly asked the questions that interested me. Carefully, I told him about my pain. It wasn't like I came and poured out all the pain at once. No. First of all, I wanted to understand him. Why he was the way he was, why he had acted that way. I sincerely wanted to understand him. If there is love in a person's soul, it inevitably manifests itself, pours out, as if from an overflowing vessel. If this doesn't happen, there is inevitably a wounded soul concealed there, a person with their own truth, with their own wounds. I'm not going to tell you what I understood in my relationship with my father. You don't really need this, but what you do need is to figure out what's happening with you. Do you value the person who hurt you? Do you want to see them in your future or not? There is no need to rush with this question, and there are no rules here. You should do as you see fit. One winter day, we were in the place where I was born. We were reminiscing about how we used to live there, what used to be where in the rooms. And then, all of a sudden, tears began to roll from my dad's eyes. At the same time he was talking so much, emotionally, as if he had been meaning to say it for a long time, but hadn't dared. The most important thing was in his words, "Children, please forgive me." I looked at him, listened, and tears flowed from my eyes too. At this moment, he showed repentance, and I was experiencing forgiveness. This was the apogee of our reconciliation, the last point, saying that we had overcome the pain that was in the heart of each of us. For me, he became an absolutely dear dad, and I, a beloved daughter. I never regretted the decision to keep him in my life, not to give up on him, not to cross him out, not to judge, but to keep. In this sense, a decision is not just a choice, it's a readiness to overcome yourself, to work hard, to grin and bear it. It's the readiness to invest in the relationship for some time, on the understanding that an answer is not going to come immediately. I remember when I turned 17. It was exactly on my birthday, early in the morning. My dad called and said, "Look out the window." Not yet remembering that this was a special day for me, I looked out of the window on the 7th floor. He was standing there, and in his hands there was something beautiful. Still sleepy, I quickly went downstairs. I went out in the street. In his hands was a huge bunch of pink, long roses and a cake made to order specially for me. Can you imagine? My dad had ordered a cake specially for me. He hugged me, kissed me on the cheek and said, "Happy birthday, daughter." I took the gifts from him, said thank you and happily ran home, and he walked away, to work, I think. His relationship with Mum was not warm enough for him to come up to the apartment. Later he told me how he had ordered the cake secretly from his second wife. At that time she didn't take kindly to our communication. How the day before he had left the gifts with someone else, and had come over to pick them up early in the morning. There are many happy and many unhappy people in the world. For someone, my story might seem funny, because they would have received many gifts from their father in their life. They would have had many beautiful holidays. In my case, such events can be counted on the fingers of one hand. That bunch of flowers, of 17 pink roses, was love that came from his heart. It was my big personal victory. I wanted to have a loving father, and he became one. Once I had made the decision to keep him in my life, despite my childhood pain. I showed patience. I built a relationship regardless of anything, because I wanted to achieve my goal, to have a loving father. Dad passed away when I was 28 years old. In the time since we got to know each other anew, we had had many shared impressions, many memories. Many times we had coffee and tea with sweets, discussed philosophical topics, picked strawberries, went on picnics, talked a lot. I remember how snow was falling in large flakes outside the window, and we were eating boiled crayfish. I remember how when I was 25, he was pulling me on a sled, how we were watching a solar eclipse through a glass. I asked him a lot about his childhood, about his parents, about my grandmother and grandfather. Why would I deprive myself of such impressions? No way. I'm thankful for the decision to make it work. I have done the right thing. I overcame myself, dealt with my childhood resentment, and built a warm relationship with an important person in my destiny. But not every person may and should be kept in your life. This depends on many factors, on your state, on their desire, and on other circumstances. There is supposed to be reciprocation in relationships. You can't foster love if the other doesn't want to. Some just need to be understood, forgiven, and let go. And you need to understand what to do. What decision will be the right one in your case? You know, I don't. Give it some thought. Betrayal and infidelity. Those who have been faced with the infidelity of their husband or wife know that this feels like death, like a loss, as if something broke that can no longer be glued back together. But some time passes and a question arises, what do I do? Break up with them or forgive? It's easy to say, to hell with that, get over it and move on. But what if it's a dear, beloved person? If it's the father of your children, and you have more than 1 year of life together behind you? How to break away from all this? Perhaps to forgive? If women were adamant in their decisions, the internet wouldn't be full of questions on how to forgive infidelity. Notice this, how to forgive. When the first emotions cool down, cold reasoning comes into play, which begins to look for the most correct solution. And I think there is one. Any event, when it has already happened, first needs to be analyzed. It's important to understand what happened and under what circumstances. I was recently bothered by a tooth, a back one, a wisdom tooth. As far as I understood, it could have been saved. But alas, I wasn't lucky with the doctor. She didn't want to bother with it. They took an X-ray, consulted with a surgeon, and decided to remove it. My own tooth, which has been with me for 30 years. I still regret it. I gave my consent, of course, but it was in the moment of confusion and insecurity. When it hurts, you're ready for anything, just to stop the pain. That was just a tooth, but in your case, it's a person. Perhaps you're thinking about whether to save the relationship or not. What do the story with the tooth and infidelity in a relationship have in common? It's important to make a choice, not based on emotions. You need to give it some good thought. Both decisions can turn out to be either right or wrong. Infidelity, in the understanding of a man and a woman, are completely different things. A woman puts her soul in an intimate relationship. She loves through intimacy. A man may do this too, but not always. He can have meaningless sex just to relieve himself, just to get a momentary pleasure. Here is a story. I am very worried. My husband cheated on me. Now that's news to me. I didn't see that coming. Was it once or repeatedly? I don't know for sure. He says it was once, but I don't believe anything. And how is he behaving now? Is he sorry or not? He is. He says the devil tempted him and he doesn't want to lose our family. And you? I'm not doing anything yet. I feel very bad. I don't know what to do. Infidelity. If it was in a state of inebriation, in some random circumstances, and on regaining consciousness the person realizes they've made a mistake and sincerely asks for forgiveness, it's one thing. It can hardly be called by the high-sounding word betrayal. Rather, it's a very ugly thing to do, with potential consequences for the relationship. But we know other cases when intimate relationships on the side are a conscious long-term arrangement, a mistress, a second family, a double life. Now this is a conscious betrayal. It's important to consider that a man and a woman may perceive and understand the same thing completely differently. For example, a woman's soul may be burning with pain. She was betrayed, while the man says, "No, I didn't betray you. I love you. It was a mistake." About the same thing. The most interesting thing is, for the woman here, her opinion is the truth. For the man, his opinion is also the truth. And wisdom lies in understanding each other, because only in this case can you make the best decision. Why the best? Because over time, we evaluate our decisions. Were they right or not? Look at the person who's guilty before you. Would you like to see them in your future or not? For example, when girls get married, they often think, now we're young, we'll live a long, happy life, there will be children, grandchildren, we'll grow old together. At the beginning of the journey, you can imagine the desired result in 20 years' time. And if this result is of a greater value for a person than what they're having to endure now, then perhaps they're ready to overcome the crisis in the relationship for the sake of what can be in the future. We know stories when people broke up after adultery. There are also stories when after infidelity, the marriage was preserved, and preserved not formally, but truly and qualitatively. There is no universal option for how to act correctly. Everyone must determine for themselves what is happening, what they want, and what they are capable of. Women usually see sexual infidelity as betrayal, and a man may not invest any meaning in intimacy. What do you think? Was it really a betrayal in your case or not? The opponent. I won't tire of repeating. I can't stress this point too strongly because many forget about this. Any conflict involves two participants, the one who hurts and the one who was hurt. But for some reason, quite often the hurt person tries to deal with their pain alone, without getting the other involved. Now, is this right? A conflict happened. It doesn't matter whether it's big or small. The offended participant can express their pain, can express it partially, or not say anything at all. Being offended silently, in some cases, is not the most correct reaction, because questions may appear in the mind of the suffering person which they will be trying to answer themselves. This is fundamentally wrong, because in this way one can aggravate their condition. For example, come to the following conclusions. He doesn't need me. He doesn't love me. There is something wrong with me. I deserved this, and the like. One may start to believe in something that doesn't actually exist. Why do quarrels occur in relationships, with mutual grudges and blames? Because for some time people didn't understand, didn't hear each other, didn't notice something, were mistaken about something. In relationships, it's important to be able to talk, to discuss your experiences, and it has to be done in a timely manner. For example, I'm worried, I'm hurt, I want, or what do you think? What do you feel? What do you want? Why are you acting this way? At first glance, it may seem that talking to each other is very simple. Yes, talking about nothing is simple. Blaming, deceiving, demanding is simple. But to open up, to be sincerely interested, to open your heart to each other, this is something else entirely. Few people in their lives have said these words when it was necessary to say them. I lack your support. I need words of praise and encouragement more often. Or, why are you avoiding talking with me? Did I offend you in any way? It's important to talk to each other, to do it qualitatively, and I'll say it again, in a timely manner. Otherwise, over time, misunderstanding deepens, and people become strangers to each other. Ask me for forgiveness. Conflict is always about two sides. You shouldn't crawl into your shell, bearing the burden of your pain on your own. Do you remember how we spoke about guilt and that it can be fair or imaginary? It's fair when a person really did something bad to another, in word or deed. Deceived them, set them up, hid them, insulted them, stole from them, cheated on them. In such a case, it's quite clear why they can listen to the grievances and despondency of the offended person. You wounded my heart, so help me heal it. After all, why is it sometimes difficult to forgive? Simply because no one is saying the words, "Forgive me." For every couple, the intimate side of life is different. Some feel and understand each other without words in sex, and some need to talk and literally explain what they like and the way they like it. It's the same in relationships in general. Some realize how to behave more wisely after a discussion, and some need to be told, "Darling, I'm hurt. Help me forgive you. Ask for forgiveness." "Darling, forgive me, I didn't mean to. I forgive you." Relationships are a dance in which the partners should feel and take into account each other's movements. Everyone is involved in the process and bears responsibility for what's happening. So why is it that when one hurts the other, very often the hurt one is left alone with their pain? Aren't the two responsible for what's happening in their relationship? By the way, admittedly, the principle of dual liability mustn't be used liberally, and in serious conflict it's unlikely to work. In this case, the phrase "ask me for forgiveness" may provoke a misunderstanding and rudeness. The responsibility for each other's feelings needs to be worked on gradually, delicately, and in the course of a long period of time. Gradually get closer, gradually open up to each other, gradually interact. First, you get acquainted, then study each other, get closer, and then begin a delicate interaction. "I don't want to offend you," or "forgive me if I caused you pain." It's important to note that this should be mutual and practiced in equal measure. It's precisely these conditions that make for emotionally warm, healthy relationships. Unfortunately, very often, people are preoccupied only with their own psycho-emotional needs in relationships. At least, everyone puts their own needs before those of the other. What do I need? What do I want? And then in its wake follows, what do you need? If people have decided to get closer to the level of personal relationships, then this control of psycho-emotional needs should be carried out mutually. Everyone should think about themselves, about their feelings, but along with this, about the feelings of the other at the same time. This can be compared to playing the piano. A melody is more beautiful when you play with two hands rather than one. If there is no relationship, as life shows, the deepest resentment appears where a relationship is likely already over. It may be resentment between former spouses who have gone through a difficult divorce. It may be resentment provoked by something despicable, inflicted by a friend who lured away one's partner, for example. It can be anything, but no longer within the framework of a relationship. Because of what happened, people can become complete strangers to each other, without allowing for the possibility of mending their relationship. In this case, their only connection is the memories and pain. It's important to note that a path to forgiveness is as difficult as heavy the pain is. As if to jeer at that, there are popular headlines these days, something like how to lose weight in a week, how to start speaking English in a month, or how to get rich by taking a course on a money mindset. But I think very soon people will return to the forgotten opinion that everything valuable is achieved by applying an effort and by discipline, and this applies to forgiveness as well. It won't come easily to you unless you're an extremely humble person who will easily wave their hand and say, "I forgive and may God forgive you." In reality, it's hard, because we're all proud, to this or that degree. We're very hurt by inattention, lack of love, ingratitude. Sometimes we're hurt by the fact that we're not treated as respectfully as we would like. I'm not saying that we don't deserve better. Maybe we do. I'm talking about the fact that many things hurt our pride. They hurt pride. At the same time, it's necessary to take into account that to some extent, pride is your opponent's weakness too. The person who offended you is also proud. That's why they may not realize their guilt before you, may not see it. For them, their misconduct may not seem that way. Or else they may realize that they've done you wrong, but won't show it because they can't bring themselves to admitting it, to saying, "It's my fault." Possibly they couldn't say it even to themselves. Pride is responsible for this state as well. Recently, I came across a video of a woman who was talking about her pain. A few years ago, a friend lured her husband away. A couple of years later, the friend, the homewrecker, called and said, "Forgive me." The woman asked her, "What are you guilty of before me?" "Nothing, I am just asking for forgiveness. I am doing a ritual, calling all friends, people I know, and asking for forgiveness in case I offended someone somehow." Did you get it? The person has no repentance at all, where it should be. Perhaps she doesn't feel guilty at all. Or maybe she does, but doesn't admit it openly. What should be done in such a case? Do we grab the traitor by the collar and shake them while hissing, "Repent before me"? But that's not the way it works. Let's say it's hard to forgive just like that, and the wrongdoer is not capable of repentance due to their spiritual state. What should be done then? Do you remain in a state of conflict all your life to live with this burden on your soul because someone is too immature to realize something and doesn't admit their guilt? And here, a phrase we used to use in our childhood will come in handy. Someone among you should be smarter. Usually it's said to the older child when the younger one doesn't respond when asked to cut it out. Yes, in a case like this, someone should be smarter. But before you know it, this thought is going to pop up first. If I forgive them, I will remove responsibility from them for this act, but I want them to be punished. And here, we should remember the meaning of the word forgive. To forgive is to break the mental connection. It means to regain the lost peace in your soul. Not in their soul, but in yours. The person who wronged you may never even find out that you will stop suffering from what happened, but at the same time, they will always remain alone with themselves, alone with their feelings. We can't but agree that one person's soul is a mystery to another. Everyone comes to a realization and repents in their own time. Someone may be visited by a deep repentance even as late as on their deathbed. Have you heard stories when a sick person about to pass away asks their relatives to call someone to ask for forgiveness? Would you really welcome the idea of waiting for many years, hoping for a miracle, that the one who caused you pain will someday ask for forgiveness? In my opinion, the greatest punishment for the wrongdoer is to leave them alone with their crime. What I mean is, forgiveness always implies that there is a guilty party. Perhaps you're not experiencing the pain of resentment for no reason, but because the person is really guilty before you. The irony of life is that everyone ought to strive to forgive and be forgiven. They may commit something unworthy, pretend that everything is fine, but God knows where the truth is. The Bible says that every person will be held accountable for every idle word, not only for actions, but for every word. Can you imagine? It's not like you've done something despicable, secretly or openly, and will get away with it. In this life, or after it, each person will be judged by God. Everyone will receive a reward for righteous deeds, and everyone will receive retribution for sins. Many feel this intuitively, and many don't even doubt it. The voice of conscience is unborn. Conscience may be in a different state with every individual, but eventually it will wake up. That's why some people on their deathbed reach out to someone to ask for forgiveness. It may seem that a woman who left a child in an orphanage will never answer for her evil deed, and so shouldn't be forgiven. It's like she's perpetually left dangling on a hook. You might think that a father who abandoned his child will be freed from parental responsibility, and therefore you mustn't forgive him, as if demonstrating to the universe he is guilty, he deserves punishment. Okay, everyone. If someone has deceived you, betrayed you, caused you harm, in any form, everyone will answer for everything. It's not that someone raped a girl in the bushes at night, walked back to the pavement, brushed himself down, and went on to enjoy a happy life. It won't be like that. Everyone who has caused harm, be it moral, physical, or psychological harm, everyone will answer for everything. It's just that we want it to happen quickly, right at this moment, and before our eyes. But it doesn't always work like this. It feels that a person is given time to atone for their guilt, given time for repentance. And only God, with 100% accuracy, sees when it's the right time to give the offender what they deserve. It will be in this life, or in the next, but it will definitely happen. How did I deserve this injustice? It so happened that we live in a period of esoteric thinking. And very often, when the victim asks, "Why did they treat me like this?" they may get an answer along the lines of, "Because you deserved it in your past life," or "You just need to understand something." Are you serious? A little girl got raped by a relative, and she has to understand something and be grateful for this experience? Or a child sick with cancer somehow deserved this? Or a woman who is beaten by her husband is to blame for his behavior? Statements like these are countless. The esoteric concept of forgiveness and acceptance of wrongdoing is stuff and nonsense. Not a single victim deserves any of this. Neither the one who was left in an orphanage, nor the one who was raped, nor the one who was cheated on, nor the one who wasn't given love, for example, parental love. None deserve any of that in their life, but unfortunately find themselves on the receiving end. And it's only as a consequence, as an attempt to alleviate one's pain, that a person may come to the conclusion that they're grateful for the misfortune that befell them. Gratitude is a way of self-help, an attempt to see something good in something bad. But this fact does not absolve the criminal. They are not freed from the responsibility for the evil they have done. If we consider this from the position of esotericism, It turns out that a rapist or a murderer is a bearer of goodness, who deserves a reward rather than punishment. But if we use common sense, a crime remains a crime, and that calls for a punishment. In my opinion, it's important to differentiate this. It may so happen that someone is going through a bad patch. Let's say it's a woman, and another woman has lured away her husband, for example. Or she's going through financial difficulties, but at the same time her conscience prompts her why it happened. Because she herself had once lured away this man from another family, or built her business on stolen money. Indeed, there are cases when misfortune happens for a reason, by way of retribution. But the person realizes this themselves. Their conscience prompts them. And all this happens within the framework of a conscious, earthly life, and not in a previous life, as some happen to maintain. Yes, it may so happen that a person can unfairly suffer damage, but it's not because they're guilty, but because the world is full of people, good and bad, and every one of them has free will. A baby was chucked into a garbage container, so it became a victim of another person's will. A girl was raped. She became a victim of another person's will. Why nothing saved her is another question, but nevertheless, the fact remains. It didn't happen through the fault of either the baby or the girl. After all, let's look back at history. Many innocent people, in disgrace of the government, ended up in hard labor camps. Priests and common folk alike were slandered, repressed, shot. Not because a good, pure person deserved evil, not because of that. It's important to note that many suffer. Some deserved it, some did not. But everyone's task is the same: to forgive. Yes, I noticed that in this chapter I have expressed some contradictory thoughts, but I hope for your judiciousness. You can't just lump all cases together and say everyone deserved everything. In the case of bankruptcy it might be so, but as for physical violence, never.